Hello everybody, welcome to my guide tutorial here on using video input with the Stable Diffusion Deforum 0.7 notebook. So the very first thing I have done here is first we have to have an input video to use. So what I did here, this is a video I've used a lot of times here from Pexels, and I do have a link down there below. So this is one I've used quite a few times. So I'm just going to first here show you the original video, which you can see is pretty big. This is 4096 by 2160. And it's a female there wearing a kind of an alien cosplay costume there out of paper mache. So what we are going to do is really kind of spice up this costume, give it some more realism. So the very first thing I did is I just resized it down to a more manageable size of 1024 by 540. And then what I did is I resized that into just a square video of 512 by 512. So this is actually the video that I'm going to use in Stable Diffusion. So there's a couple things you can do. You can just leave it like this after it's done, or you can go ahead and resize it back to the original. So I'll show you what I did here earlier. So here is the final render I had here. And this I just kept it in the 512 by 512 size. So we can go ahead and resize it back to the original. Now when it is rendering though, it's rendering it in Stable Diffusion using the 512 by 512. So it'll also kind of skew the renders that we made there when we export it again. So you'll have to decide if that's something you want to do, and it'll depend on your video, that kind of thing. So this is it after I resized it back to the original size there. So you can see like her nose gets long and stuff. So while it's putting it back to the original size of the video, we maintain that original size of the source video. It is going to skew some of the things we did in Stable Diffusion, so it'll just be dependent on the video. But this was just a sample I did earlier, but I decided to redo the guide because I just wasn't really happy with this video. I wanted to make something a little bit better, and also I just wanted to redo it. So again, here's what we do though. So you want to use a 512 by 512 for coherency and other reasons. The other thing I always do when I'm making a starting video is I'll first extract just some still frames from it, showing some of the different aspects of the video. So I did the same thing with these. I took a still frame from the video, and then I just resized them to 512 by 512. And you kind of want to capture whatever perspective or zooms you have in the regular video there for that. So let's go ahead and get into the notebook now and get to work here with these 4 files. Okay, so the next thing I have done here, this is not necessary, but what I've done is I've uploaded my files to my Google Drive. I've just made a starting media folder here where I will upload my starting images, starting video, and I have my 3 screenshots here and my resized video file here. Okay, now the other thing you can do, you can just upload them here to the temporary files here in the notebook you're running, so they'll get deleted after the session. So you can do it either way. If you want, you can just click and drag your files over there. And I am using the A100 for this, so I do have my settings kind of cranked up here just because I'm going to be making a few videos here. It helps to render it faster, but you can do this just with the standard versions as well. And I am using the 1.5 model that you can get right here. And the V1 inference we're always using the V1 unless we're using one of the new 2.0 or 2.1 models. And for right now, I'm just going to have animation mode on none. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just test some of my prompts here with the still images using a input image, a starting image. And I'm also going to go over the basics of that here. So this is kind of a 2-in-1 tutorial. I will be showing how to use a starting image here as well in this part, which is very useful. If you haven't done a video before of the video you're using, I'd really recommend first doing experiments just on your starting image because you don't want to have to be restarting your video over 10 times because you don't like how the prompt modifies it. So I really recommend before you start a video, if you haven't used a prompt on it before, go ahead and just take some still shots of that video and test out a few prompts on it. See how it will modify it. It will change slightly when you go into video mode just because there is a few differences between the way that video mode works and there's also different settings up here. So we'll have to get that as close to possible, but this will give you a good idea of how it is going to make your video look. Okay, so like always, let me first go over some of my settings. As I said, I am using the premium runtime and the runtime shape just for this because I'm doing some video, but you do not have to. You can do this just in standard. I am using the 1.5 model, the inference V1. For right now, I have animation mode turned off, which we will be changing as soon as we get to the video. And then here's my prompt. So right now, the prompt, since I'm just doing a still image, it's going to be taking from this prompt up here. And since I'm using the 1.5 model so that I can use weights. So because anytime you're doing fantasy art or sci-fi art with female characters, you can get, like topless women and nudity because fantasy artists like to paint naked women. So I did also put some NSFW kind of filters here in my negative prompts. So I'm using negative prompts on here also to take away things like watermarks, signatures, extra limbs, all that kind of thing. So the weights work good on the 1.5 model. They do not work that good on the 2.1 model, so that's why I'm using the 1.5 model, so I can use a bit of those weights here. And it'll just, anything you can do to kind of keep your video frames more consistent is always good. So the next thing we're doing here is I'm using a starting image. I am using the Euler sample. The DDIM samplers do work again now for still images. And I don't think this is the latest update of the notebook. This is one I've been using for a little. It is the 0.7, but they might have fixed that with the DDIM sampler where it works on videos. This one doesn't, so I'll look into that a bit later. For now, though, I'm just using the Euler sampler. And since I'm using a starting image, I'm clicking this right here, using it, and then this is the strength. This will determine how much my image will look like my starting image. And so I've got my 3 shots here right now. We just copy the path here to use the starting image and paste it right here. Check off init image, and this determines the strength. So I'll do a couple samples here. I'll do one here to begin with, and we're ready to go already here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and render my image now. And since it's a strength of 1, it will be probably done as soon as it starts here, because it is keeping the image exactly the same. So there it is, completely unchanged. 3 times there. Now what I'm going to do is go and put that strength down to 0. And I'll change my steps too, so it'll use your steps. The strength also determines how many steps it takes. So at 0, it's going to do all the steps. If it was at 0.5, it would do half the steps, 40. So I kept it at 80. We really only need about, well, 30, 40 steps is usually pretty good for this. Where'd my strength? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to put 0 now. So this means it's not going to use the starting image at all. It is just going to use my prompt. And this will actually also affect the video, even without that init checked off. So you can see here the kind of image that it's going to sort of transfer the video into there. Okay, and now I'm going to put it at 0.5. Okay, and here we are, or actually this is only going to render about 15 frames there, yeah. So if you notice it's only, I mean steps, I mean. So if you notice it's only doing 20 steps there. So we usually want a bit more than that. So anytime, like I said, anytime you adjust your strength, what that'll do is it'll keep the original image for a portion of the steps. So right now it's keeping the initial image for zero point 0.5 of the steps. So it's just keeping the first 20 steps unchanged, and then it's changing it with the last 20 steps. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up to about 80. And I'm going to put the strength here at about 0.6. And what this will do is this will maintain enough of our original image where it'll still maintain a lot of the video quality, but it will also change it to look like our prompt. So as you can see there, it's looking a lot more consistent with the video, and it's just really modifying that image. And maybe we'll give it just a little bit more there. So this is what you should do though before you start your video. You want to test out your prompts. And I'll start with this one, then I got another couple of prompts I will run as well. So, okay, so that looks good. This is modifying it. So here's the other thing we want to do. Now that was just one of my starting image. I'm now going to test the second one here because our video is going to change. So we kind of want to see what it's going to do as the video changes, how it's going to modify it. So this will give us kind of a good general idea of it. Not exactly, but we can get the general gist of it by doing this and running our different images there. This one should be more of a close-up, yeah. And so that still looks pretty good. It's changing it enough so that it no longer looks like the video. It definitely looks like, more of a digital rendering there. And then let's try our final one here. So right now this prompt is looking pretty good here for this one. And then I'll try, this one's kind of a sci-fi alien kind of prompt. Yeah, female alien queen. And I'll try one of our more Android kind of prompts after this. And then I'll decide which one we're going to use here for the video. So I kind of like this one. And then I've got another one that was one of my very first videos I made with Stable Diffusion. I kind of stole the prompt from that. And so this doesn't look bad, doesn't look that great, but this kind of gives us an idea of how it's going to make our video look. So I'm now going to go ahead and change the prompt out. Okay, so again, I'm using weights, so I'm going to keep my weights over there, and I'm just going to change out this part, the positive part of the prompt. And this one is a close-up portrait of a cyberpunk female Ishvara goddess, so quite a few modifiers there, just to create kind of an interesting image here. And there we have that, and that looks pretty good too. I kind of like, that's a little more detail, definitely on the mid-range shot there. Let's go ahead and try the far away shot, and then the close-up shot. Maybe we'll switch to this one. So here's the slightly further away shot. Yeah, we're getting some kind of blurry stuff there in the background, but that doesn't look too bad. Let's go try this last one here. Actually, I think it was this one is the close-up. Yeah, number 2. So it's always a good idea, just experiment around with how your prompts are going to modify the video before you start, and that'll give you a good idea. And let me show you some other my other settings. So I'm using the Euler sampler, which is a little quicker. If you want something more realistic, we can use the ancestral. So, but it will take a little longer to render. Okay, and there's the close-up. Yeah, and that's a pretty clean looking prompt. Also, you want to make sure you're getting kind of consistent ones here, because remember, it's going to be modifying every single frame. So you want something that's going to be fairly consistent. That will always help. You don't want your prompts here to look vastly different from another. Let's go ahead and try the ancestral one. We'll see how this one looks. And this one gives it more kind of a 3D kind of engine look, game engine look. Yeah, those all look pretty good. Let's go ahead and do one. I got one final prompt here I'm going to throw in, and then I'll decide which one we're going to do here. Okay, so that one was kind of just a surreal, just kind of a mix of different sort of prompts there. This next one is more kind of keeping in line with what her costume was originally, like alien sci-fi. This is actually a Android one, so let's see how this one looks here. And then we'll go ahead and decide which one to use here for the video. And I might do final renders of all of them just to kind of show you some variety. And so this is our Android. So this is kind of what I really had in mind more to begin with on this. So yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and do this. I'll probably just wind up doing them all. So next thing we're going to do here, now we're going to get up into the meat and bones of the project here, which is video input mode. So first thing we want to do here is change this to video input. Now our frames are not going to matter because it's going to use however many frames are in our video. And we can change that. The motion parameters will not matter either. It's not going to use the motion because it's not going to be zooming in or out. It's just using the frames of the video as a reference. So I'm using the color coherence. I'm using the video input. That will keep the same color that the video is. We can change that too and see how that changes. The diffusion cadence, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off. I do not think it uses that for the video, but I'm not 100% sure. Same with 3D depth warping. I don't think any of this is going to make much effect. Now the color coherence video, this can matter. What this will do, I think, is if you put this up, it will just do the color coherence every other frame. Like if I put it to 2, this is going to use every single frame for the color coherence. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that for now. Here is the other important one. So this is where we want to, first of all, put our video. So this is my video file. So we copy the path there for my video. Okay, and I've got my video there. This is the resized one I did to 512 by 512 pixels. This also matters. So the extract nth frame right now at 1, this is going to extract every single frame of the video. So if my video is 512 frames, it's going to make 512 frames. If I put this up to 2, it'll save me some time on the render and only render every other frame of the video. So we'll lose a bit of FPS, a little bit of, it might get a little choppier. So for now, I'm just going to leave it on 1 because I've got my A100, might as well use it. and I'm going to overwrite the extracted frames. Now I'm not going to get into masks for this. I'm going to save that for probably the advanced tutorial or maybe intermediate, but I'm going to do all of these tutorials I'm doing now in 3 basic versions, and this one is the basic. So I'm just giving you the bare essentials here to make a video using an input video. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just leave that on 1 for now. And I'm not using the hybrid video. That's something different as well that we'll go over later. And that's all I'm going to change here. So that's really all we need to concern ourselves with right now. The strength schedule here, I do not believe matters. Let's go ahead and test this. I really think that it is just that init image strength. But let's go find out. Let's go find out and make sure. I haven't done one of these for a little bit. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do though is this is up here. My prompt is in the prompts, not the animation prompt. So I'm going to need to move this prompt to the animation. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here and put it down here in the animation prompts. Okay, so this is the same prompt that we had up above. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And again, let's see, what's my strength at? It is at 0.62. So let's go ahead and run it here. And we should see if that strength up in the video does affect it. I do not believe it does. So oh wait, let me stop here. Really quick also, one other thing we want to do is uncheck that init image because we're now using video input, not the init image. So I'm going to uncheck this, but it will still use, I'm pretty sure it's still going to use this strength for the video, even though we don't have that init checked. So let's go ahead and test that. That is something that's not really intuitive. That's just kind of the way the notebook was coded for some reason. And I think it was like this for a long time, so I don't know if this was just something that has, maybe gotten there accidentally, but either way, it doesn't really matter. It works, so that's what we cared about. And yes, right now it's still looking a lot like the video. So if it was using the strength setting up here of 0.1, it would look nothing like the video. And we can further test that. I'll just go ahead and run this again and just put it at 1, which should make it stay exactly like the video if it used that. But it does not use that. It uses the strength down here. So that is something really important. You can see also it is changing quite a bit. So I did also make a mistake as well. There's one other thing here we're going to change that I forgot to go over. And that will be right here in the seed behavior. So whenever we're doing a video, instead of using the iteration, we want to use the fixed seed behavior. And this is the only kind, excuse me, this is the only kind of render or animation that we use this on. If we try to use this in 3D video, it will look really bad really soon. So this is the only one we want to use that on. And again, I did change the strength up there to 1 just to kind of prove the point that it actually is using the init image setting as the strength. Even though it's not checked, it uses this as the strength. And we'll go ahead and start here, and it should be a little more consistent now. I still have the seed kind of random, which is fine. That way we can just see if we like the first render. If we don't, we can start it over. And there we go. You can see too that it is changing it. If that strength up above was working, this would just stay looking exactly like the video at 100%. So again, we do adjust our strength setting for our input videos down here under init settings, even when it's not checked. Now the mask is a different case. We do use the mask up there, but for this particular item, we do need to use the strength setting here. So this is something that a lot of people overlook and kind of just quit using input video. They try it a few times, say this thing sucks, it doesn't work, but this is the key. This is the key to the Lamborghini right here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and let this run, and we'll come check on this video when it's done here. So I think, yeah, right now you should really have everything you need to make an input video now just with what I've shown you so far. And like I said, I'll just go ahead and let this run, and we'll come check on it when it is finished. And I just wanted to point one other thing out too, what I was talking about before, just to emphasize this as well. If you notice, it is rendering 30 steps per frame right now, which is at about the minimum, I think, for rendering a good video. So we'll just go ahead and keep it at that. But I just want to show you also, just to kind of emphasize this as well, that my steps are actually 80. So it should be rendering 80 steps. The reason it's only rendering 30 is because of my strength setting right here. So if this was at 0.9, then it would keep like 90% of the steps and it would only render about 10 steps for each one. So your strength directly affects the steps as well. And I've said this in many of my other videos, and it is true as always that no setting is a solo instrument. What we are dealing with here with this notebook is an orchestra, and every single instrument can affect all the other instruments. So if we got one instrument playing out of key, the other instruments are also going to have to play out of key to go along with it. So I just wanted to point that out, and you always want to pay attention to your strength setting, and that will relate to your steps. So if you have 100 steps up there and you have the strength setting really low, it's going to render a lot of those steps. So you want to make sure anytime you turn your strength setting down, also turn your steps down. Let me see, is that right? Strength setting down. Yeah, because if you turn your strength setting down, it's going to render more steps. So you want to turn your steps down. If you turn your strength setting up, you might need to turn your steps up. It just depends on how many steps you want to do. I'd recommend a minimum of like 30 for most of these samplers. So that's about where we want to be at right now is 30. Okay, we'll go ahead and I'll check back when it's done. Okay, our first render here is done. I'm going to go ahead and create the video here. And then we'll try some of those other prompts and maybe cut the frame rate, but let's go ahead and see how this turns out. And so you can see we're still getting a bit of morphing there. So maybe we'll do this next one. Maybe we'll crank up the strength a bit there. Remember, it's always a trade-off between strength and detail. So the more strength we have, the less morphing we'll have, but the less detail kind of with our image. So maybe let's try a 0.7 on this next one here, and we'll also try using one of those other prompts I had prepared earlier. But as you can see though, this is really maintaining the coherency of our original video and modifying it quite a bit. Okay, I'm putting my other prompt in here now, and this one will be more kind of the out. Now here's another thing too, is I did have it on the ancestral, so that does take longer to render. So I'm going to go ahead and put it down to the Euler here. So this will give it a slightly less realistic look, but it will render a bit quicker. And you can see now we're just doing a smoking 11.6 iterations a second, which is a lot faster than the last one. So this should render about quite twice as fast here. Oh yeah, one other thing too. Let's go ahead and change the strength. I forgot to modify that. So this time I'm going to try it with the strength at 0.7 here. We'll just crank it up to 0.7. So this is going to cut into our detail a bit, but the pro is it should give us a little more consistency between frames, a little less flickering, and again, everything always works together. The scale can have a bit to do with that too. Actually, let me turn this down just a bit. The higher the scale is, the more it will change each frame a bit, kind of. This is kind of one of those black box settings where the scale is supposed to make it look more like your prompt. So just in general, I usually keep it between like 8 and 12. You can go a lot higher, but for this, I'm going to try it at 10. Let's go ahead and see how this one looks. And I just got it on random, so each one I start here is going to look a little different. So that's the other thing you can do too. If you don't like how it starts off, if you don't like the look of it, then you can start it over. And that's okay. Let's go ahead and let's just start it over a couple times. Let's just kind of see what our range is here, what kind of images we're generating with this prompt. So this is kind of a cyberpunk female Ishvara goddess, which is kind of that Indian goddess look. And I did have one of my first videos with this prompt. That's the one that looks kind of really 3D when you zoom in on it. That's all right. You know, let's try something else too. What I'm going to do this time also is I'm going to change the color coherence. We're going to just change that to, I usually use LAB or RGB. So it's not going to drastically change the color. It should still use, it'll still have a lot of the original image color just because it's using that in the strength settings. You know, it's using that as a reference. So it's not going to completely change the color of it. It's just not using it strictly by the video content. So as you can see, we still got pretty much the same color palette. And this one's not starting off too bad. Let's just do one more. Let's see if we can get the face maybe a little bit clearer on one of these. And I've got the strength now for this one at, let's see, 0.7. Okay, so this should give us less flickering than the last one. I don't like this one. Let's do the next one. Let's try again. Okay, I'm just going to let this one run now, unless it looks really bad. I just kind of wanted to get rid of those highlights a bit on the top of the head there. Okay, that one looks all right. We'll go ahead and let this go because that looks like it's on the hair there. Okay, we'll let this one run and we'll come check back when it's done. So again, the changes I did on this one, aside from the prompt, is I cranked the strength up to 0.7 instead of 0.62, and I turned off the color coherence matching the video and changed it. Where did it go? It's down here somewhere. There it is. Okay, so I changed it from the video input to the video match frame 0 LAB. So I usually use one of these two, unless I'm using video input, of course. So we'll go ahead and let this one go, and we'll see how this one turns out when it's done with those changes. Okay, our video here is done here, and let's go ahead and just look at this one more time. And again, this one, it turned out pretty good, has pretty good detail and everything, but we are still getting quite a bit of flickering there, where it's just not quite as consistent from frame to frame. It does look a little better once it gets close up there also. That's another thing too. Videos work, especially with people. They'll look a lot better if you have a close-up picture of a person. Even in like still images, sometimes it renders the eyes really bad and things like this at range. Remember, this is also the 1.5 model. The newer one does do eyes and things a lot better. But I'm using this one because we can use the weights, so there's benefits to both. But the technique is still the same. It won't matter if you're using the 1.5 model or the 2.1 model. But let's go ahead now and look at this last render we did. This should have a little less flickering, which means also it might not change the image quite as much. It'll still look a little bit closer to our source video. And there we go. We see we still are getting a bit of face flickering there, which again should really drastically come down once we zoom in on it there. So I kind of like that effect there. That kind of really has a realistic look to it and did eliminate a lot of the morphing. The eyes are still a little bit wonky. But again, this tutorial, this is just kind of showing you how to do this. This isn't something, I've sat down and refined a lot. You're just kind of seeing this in real time as I'm doing it. Yeah, it one turned out all right. Not too bad. Let's go ahead and do one more here. I'm just going to go ahead and change the prompt here. And then what we'll do is we'll go and use that last other color coherency prompt started. Let's go ahead and do this one. This one is kind of the alien prompt here. And let's change, just to see it, we're going to change our color coherence here, yeah, to the RGB. So I usually use the lab or the RGB, or for video, I'll often use video input. And again, with this video, because it's so kind of monochromatic, it's kind of blue, I don't think it's really making a huge difference here. And I'll get into some of the other functions like masking and a lot of these other settings in the next tutorial for video input, which will be the intermediate. This is just kind of the basic. This is just intended to get you up and running, to get anybody, whether you're brand new to this, you should be able to watch this and do a video. So let's go ahead and run this one here. And let's see, we'll go ahead and keep it on that sampler. And what was our strength at 0.7? I think we'll just leave it there. Actually, since we did one with a bit of a stronger strength, let's actually, I'll just do a little bit of this. This might get kind of crazy. I'm going to put it down to 0.5. This is going to cause quite a bit of morphing, but you'll see the difference. It's also going to be rendering more steps for each frame. Okay, and for this last render, I have gone ahead and changed the prompt again. We're going with the alien one this time, but I'm going to get into this very last one. And on this video, since this video is kind of monochromatic, it don't really matter. So the first video we did using the color coherence, the same as the video input. The second one we did with the lab, and this last one we'll go ahead and use RGB. And this just kind of keeps the colors consistent from frame to frame is what this does. So it's still going to be based on our video. It's going to start off with that blue, and I don't anticipate the colors changing too much from that. So I changed the prompt here to this alien version, and I also put the strength down to 0.5, and it's not going to be used in the video as closely as a reference. So we'll just do this for a little bit. I just want to show you, you can turn that down and really get, kind of deviate a lot from your video. The problem is though that it's gonna morph too much here. You'll see. I'll go ahead and let this run for a little bit. Even though you can get more interesting images, like I said, it's always a trade-off between the detail and the strength. So this will probably give us some. It'll change the image more. It'll give us more detailed image, more like our prompt, but it won't be quite as consistent. We'll see. We'll see how this one turns out. Okay, the final render is done here. Let's go ahead and look at the last one. Again, we had pretty good coherence on this last one. Okay, and let's look at our final render here. And this was our last one where we cranked it up to 0.7. So we got a bit more coherency there. Didn't change the image quite as much. And we're still losing quite a bit of coherency there in the beginning from the far away shots. So I'd probably just edit this one, cut out that first 7 seconds or so. It starts to look a lot better once we zoom in a little bit there. Face gets more consistent. Not a whole lot of change to the original image, just kind of smoothed things out, kind of gave her kind of a different look there. Let's go ahead and run this one, this last one we did, where it'll change her quite a bit more into an alien. And let's see, I think this one, yeah, I turned this one down to 0.5 on the strength. So not only did it change the image a bit more, but it would render more steps for each one, so it'll probably have more detail as well. So let's go ahead and look at this one. So you can see it's changed it quite a bit more. We're definitely getting, kind of more interesting images, but we're also not getting just quite as much coherency. So it just depends on what you're doing there. But I think this definitely has like kind of more interesting frames there, but it's just still skipping around a bit. And some of this can also be curved. Once I get into the masking, I can show you how to use that to kind of mask certain areas off, and that'll give us some more coherency. I guess I kind of like this one. I don't know, this one and the last one. I kind of like this one the best, but I don't like all that flickering around. That's what you get when you turn that strength setting down. You'll get more interesting images, more detail, but you lose a bit of the coherency. So it's always a trade-off. Just remember, everything's always a trade-off when you're making these videos. So anyways, though, that'll kind of wrap up this tutorial. I've got much more coming soon, as well as many other things. I've also been making models for my Patreons on my Patreon page, things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and continue the series. The next one will be intermediate, and I'm not sure if I'm probably going to put the masking in on the last one, the expert one, but we'll see here. I'll see. I might just do one more for this. I don't know. We'll see. But I will revisit this topic and get into some of these areas and the settings, and I'm going to cover every setting in the notebook. So thank you for watching. I will be back in very soon. You'll have a great rest of your day or night, whatever the case may be.